Hello everyone. In this video, we will understand the topic environment. You must note that environment is not a soft add-on topic. It is where current affairs and static science meet every single week. We'll move from crisis to conservation. If you study environment as scattered facts, you'll keep forgetting it. If you study it as a system, it stays. So why does environmentalism matter? Because environmental damage never stays in one box. It creates a ripple effect. Greenhouse gases have increased by about 1/3 since the Industrial Revolution. That drives global temperature rise. Rising temperatures accelerate glacier melt and sea level rise, which directly threatens coastal areas. Warmer conditions also help disease vectors and pathogens thrive. And then comes the core definition you should actually remember. Environmentalism is the duty to respect, protect, and preserve nature. Here's a classic prelims trap. Ocean acidification is primarily caused by CO2 absorption, not ozone depletion. If you mix those two, you lose an easy marks. Now let's diagnose the scale of the problem in India. This is not just an environmental issue. It is a public health emergency. About 12.5% of all deaths in India are linked to air pollution. Around 1 lakh children under 5 are lost annually. On the water side, 86% of water bodies are critically polluted. The Ganga is described here as the most polluted river globally, and the Yamuna is ranked 10th. And then comes the food security link. 94.5% of agriculture relies on groundwater. That is the real takeaway. Polluted water is not only an ecology problem. It becomes a health problem, an agriculture problem, and finally, an economic problem. Now look at two burdens together: waste and forest loss. India generates about 62 million tons of waste annually. The comparison given is useful for scale, more than 10 times the Great Pyramid. And only 20% of that waste is treated. By 2030, the projection jumps to 165 million tons. At the same time, forest cover stands at 24.62%, while the target remains 33%. And what is pushing that loss? Three drivers are named clearly: mining, illegal logging, and urbanization. This is how UPSC expects you to think. One crisis is not enough. Waste pressure and ecological loss are feeding each other. Now we move to the institutional shield, the legal framework. You need the chronology clean in your head. 1974, the Water, Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. 1981, the Air, Prevention and Control of Pollution Act. 1986, the Environment Protection Act, the umbrella legislation. 2010, the National Green Tribunal Act. 2013, the Companies Act, which brings in the CSR mandate. The memory hack here is useful. WAEN, Water, Air, Environment, NGT. But don't stop there. Laws are only the shield. They are not the victory. Now comes the part most average answers ignore: implementation failure. First case: faulty plantation in Delhi. About 137 million rupees was spent, but the effort failed because the wrong species was selected and maintenance demands were high. Second case: monoculture. Planting a single species may look green on paper, but it creates what this lesson calls biological deserts and leads to biodiversity loss. Third case: shrimp farms versus mangroves. Conversion of mangroves in places like the Sundarbans and Godavari region leads to ecological disaster, including acidic soil issues. This is where toppers separate themselves. Most aspirants quote laws. Stronger answers critique implementation. Now bring in CSR, corporate social responsibility. India is presented here as the first and only country to enforce CSR on specific companies under the Companies Act 2013. The goal is straightforward: integrate social and environmental values into business. But here comes the loophole. CSR can also be misused. Reports of fraud, money laundering, and greenwashing can hide under the language of charity. Again, the same lesson holds. Don't praise policy blindly. Show that you understand the loopholes. Now shift from law and corporations to the first line of defense: education and habits. Three habits are placed at the center: reduce, reuse, recycle. Then go paperless and eliminate single-use plastic. A strong number is given here. Single-use plastics represent a $120 billion annual waste opportunity. Then the lesson expands into the pillars of environmental education. For nature, it means understanding ecosystems and protecting natural resources. For community, it means involving and empowering local communities in initiatives. For sustainable development, it means meeting present needs without compromising the future. Now let's bring in corporate case studies, because policy without examples remains weak in mains answers. Infosys is presented as having partnered with the UN to combat plastic pollution. Its stated goal? 50% reduction in per capita plastic waste. Its achievement? Plastic-free campuses. ITC is shown as striving to exceed the Plastic Waste Management Rules 2016. Its goal? 100% of packaging reusable or recyclable over the next decade. These are not just examples to read and move on from. These are answer writing assets, especially in GS Paper 3 and Ethics. Now move to one of the most important recent frameworks: Mission Life, Lifestyle for Environment. Its origin is clear. Introduced by India at COP26 in 2021. Its philosophy is also clear: shift from mindless consumption to deliberate utilization. And the goal is bigger than lifestyle branding. It is about building a circular economy and a global community of P3, pro-planet people. That phrase matters because it turns environment from a state-only responsibility into a citizen-level responsibility. Now balance the crisis with achievements. India's green shoots. Forest cover increased to 21.71%, up from 21.54% in 2017 to 21.71% in 2021, alongside rising populations of lions, tigers, leopards, elephants, and rhinos. In energy, 40% non-fossil fuel capacity was achieved 9 years early. In fuels, the 10% ethanol blending target was achieved 5 months early, ahead of the November 2022 deadline, up from 1.5% in 2013 to 14. And in wind power, India is placed as having the fourth largest capacity globally, with installed renewable capacity reaching 150.54 gigawatts as of November 2021. Here's a prelims trap you should not miss. Don't vaguely remember that India achieved targets early. Know which target and how early. Now, let's close the chapter by seeing the whole architecture. At the center sits environmental awareness. On one side is the crisis: high PM 2.5 and NOx in major cities, water contamination in scarcity, groundwater depletion, overflowing landfills, plastic pollution, and an e-waste surge. On another side is the shield, the Water Act of 1974, the Air Act of 1981, the Environment Protection Act of 1986, the NGT Act of 2010, and the right to fair compensation and transparency in Land Acquisition, Rehabilitation, and Resettlement Act 2013. Then come the gaps: poor enforcement, weak monitoring and accountability, inadequate waste infrastructure, corruption, and bureaucratic hurdles. And finally, the future: life, P3, and corporate action through ESG commitments, green innovation, and sustainable supply chains. Environmental awareness is not just a subject, it is a survival strategy. Here's your homework. Decide honestly which of the 3R is hardest to implement in daily life: reduce, reuse, or recycle, and explain why in one UPSC-style paragraph. When you can move from crisis to law to gaps to solutions without sounding generic, you are exam ready.